You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast produced by Veteran Strategies and featuring conversations with fascinating and impactful men and women who have shaped our world, our communities, and our history. My name is Robert Vane, Principal of Veteran Strategies, and your host for our discussion. You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, a local veteran public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, Garmong Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and MacAllister Machinery, your friendly neighborhood Caterpillar dealer. You may find all your sales and rental equipment needs at MacAllister.com. We are pleased to announce our podcast is now a member of the All Indiana Podcast Network in partnership with Wish TV. You may find Leaders and Legends at allindianapodcastnetwork.com. Thinking of starting a podcast or need to host a public meeting? Let Leaders and Legends LLC be your partner as you look for new ways to communicate your message. Please contact Chris Spangle or me at leadersandlegends.net. Thank you for joining us on the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today is John Gregg, the longest serving Speaker of the House from the Democratic Party in Indiana history. John, we've been trying to get you on for quite a while. Mr. Jim Shella is joining us. You guys can have the first 58 minutes, and I'll ask the 5 questions at the end. John, thank you.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Robert. And I always tell people when I'm introduced as the longest serving Democrat speaker in the history of the state, that's really more a testimony to it being a Republican state than to my talent. I want to make that clear. I mean,
Jim?
Your tenure is significantly shorter than Brian Bosma's.
Mine, but I left voluntarily. I mean, I left and I turned it over to Bauer. Now, he immediately lost it the next election. But yeah, I can't believe Bosma stayed there 32 years. Oh my! I mean,
he wasn't speaker that long, but he is the longest serving Republican speaker. Okay,
let me say a few more nice things about Mr. Gregg. He was born in Linton in Greene County, Indiana.
In a hospital, or I'd have been born at Sanborn in Knox County.
Sanborn didn't have the hospital?
No.
What about a barn?
We had a barn. Both parents were born at home. I guess we could have done it.
Ask that. He was minority leader from 94 to 96, and he was majority leader from 90 to 94. He's always been super kind to me, even when I worked for Connie Noss. You were very nice to me. Those things usually don't go together. Gregg was a precinct committeeman from 74 to 86. He was a delegate to the Democratic National Convention 4 times. And in 2008, I want to make sure I ask you about this, or Jim will. You were an honorary chair of Hillary Clinton for president and accompanied former President Bill Clinton to events across Indiana. So I want to talk about that 2008 primary.
Absolutely great. I'm obviously very talented. Every 50 years, a Democrat primary in Indiana comes into play, and I picked the wrong side. But I can tell you, I never had more fun. Hogsett and I traveled, Mayor Hogsett, traveled with Bill Clinton all across the state. And I mean, I never had so much fun with my clothes on in my life.
Wait a second. President Bill Clinton?
President Bill Clinton. I mean, it was fun. It really was. It was nothing but fun. He was a marvelous person, one-on-one or in a small group. It was
he didn't talk to the press, though.
Well, he may not have. I don't know. No. And she would, you know what? For somebody that gets the bum rap like she does, she's actually unbelievably enjoyable in a small group. I mean, the media, you see her on television. I mean, I'll be the first to admit she didn't come off warm and fuzzy. Man, when you meet her, it's just totally different.
Okay.
Jim Shella's holding a grudge.
With another Minnesotan, same thing when I met Walter Mondale. You probably were around Walter some.
I've actually met Walter Mondale. Much like me, Walter Mondale grew up in a small town in southern Minnesota.
I knew you were both.
He was son of a preacher. I had the opportunity to talk to him when he was vice president.
What about Humphrey, or was McCarthy from Minnesota too?
Eugene
Wisconsin.
McCarthy he was from Minnesota.
Was he?
Yep. Hubert Humphrey came and spoke to, I was going to say Indiana. I'm losing track of my Minnesota roots. I went to Minnesota Boys State as a junior in high school, and Hubert Humphrey came and spoke to us there. So
there you go.
There you go.
When did you meet Speaker Gregg the first time?
Oh, I met Speaker Gregg in the 80s.
Yeah, early 80s.
When he was lobbying in the coal industry.
I lobbied before I became a legislator. I do everything backwards.
And John and I were very well acquainted. Used to see each other at the Indianapolis Press Club. Worked on the gridiron together, and have managed to remain friendly all this time. I would say.
Right.
Was it weird to, or not weird? Was it difficult to cover him during his two races for governor in 12 and 16?
No, and what I've told people with regard to other, I don't think you can do anything without making friends. Whatever your business is, you have to reach out and create relationships and be friends with people. Now, the politicians and the media have an adversary relationship by definition, but what I found was that when I was dealing with a politician who was a friend, I felt like I could ask tougher questions because they knew I wasn't just trying to gig them, that they were legitimate questions.
I think that's fair. I always thought I got along fine with almost all the press, and now Abdul used to just really yank me off. But I know, like what's that guy, that crazy guy that's Attorney General, Rokita. Like him, I never considered Abdul real media, but I always enjoyed dealing with.
Did you represent Attorney General Rokita in that lawsuit?
No, I didn't. But I don't really know him. I've met him a few times, but I wouldn't know Todd Rokita.
Tell me this, just to start things off a little bit. Is my memory accurate? You grew up a Republican?
No, that was Joe Hogsett. No, I didn't grow up a Republican. My mother was a Republican. My dad was a Democrat. But no, I was not a Republican.
But if I remember correctly, you told me that you decided that your future was as a Democrat because of the area where you lived.
You know, I was a big Democrat young. I loved LBJ. I remember that election. I remember Kennedy being assassinated, of course. Remember the 64 election. I was real excited about Jimmy Carter in 76, and I was a committeeman then. But with the inflation and Ronald Reagan coming along, that's of course a conservatism that doesn't exist anymore. That would have been the closest thing I might have had where I thought, well, do I belong here or not? And I always had strong labor roots, and Dad had a unionized company, and so that was kind of already laid out there for me.
So how about now? What we've seen in this country is the Republicans have moved, by and large, farther to the right. Mm-hmm. The Democrats seem to be moving more to the left. And I know, even though you've been a Democrat your entire adult life, you've been a moderate Democrat. Yeah. Do you fit in the modern day Democratic Party?
Well, I do. There's just fewer of us. A lot of them, of course, have become Republican because of social issues or just the pure liking of one of the candidates or disliking of another candidate, possibly. I'm still strong labor. You don't hear Democrats talking about being a labor Democrat anymore, but I'm a big fan of organized labor, public education, environmental. But with that said, I am a capitalist. That was always the thing before. The progressives really weren't much on the capitalism, and now all they want to do is talk social issues. And I believe in equality and social justice, but I'd like to see us broaden that and talk about some other things on a national level.
You're from Sanborn.
Mm-hmm.
How big is Sanborn?
350 people, and I'm related to about 341 of them.
Okay. And the reason it's still 350 people is because young people go away to college, go away to find work, move out.
Sure.
Why haven't you ever moved out?
Oh, I thought you were, you know what? My wife always said this was the corniest thing she ever heard. I've seen the three prettiest sights in the world. I've seen the Great Wall of China. I've seen the Palace at Versailles. That's Versailles for those of you not familiar with the French pronunciation. And I've seen the caution light at the intersection of 67 and 59 at Sanborn. It's home. And, I've told some people, boy, if I'd have known 45 years ago, I'd have been still making my living in Indianapolis. I'd have moved up here. But, I've got less than about a couple hundred acres. I live out in the river bottoms. My mother's still alive. I just can't imagine living anywhere else. You walked in here, and contrary to the Republicans being the ag party, you could tell I was in the process of selling cattle. So, I like being out in the country.
Why did you started out as a lobbyist?
Mm-hmm.
Why become a politician?
I always wanted to be in the legislature. I love American history, and I really think that America is the way it is today because of our political system. We have managed to grow to become a world power, the world power in still many aspects. And I think it was because of our political system, and in part, in more recent times, even because of our two-party political system as opposed to more of a fractured system. I just thought that was the way to make a difference, and I don't regret it. I never really considered myself a politician. I always preferred being called a statesman. Don't laugh. You're calling that. I don't know. Am I a leader or a legend? I didn't get elected, and I'm not dead, so I don't know which category I fit in. But I really couldn't imagine doing anything else. I mean, I will still have people come up to me and will say, you helped me with this or that, or my grandparents or parents, and that's a nice thing to know.
I think the best story of your political career is the fact that you went from seat number 100 in the House of Representatives to seat number 1, correct?
That's right.
Tell me how that happened.
It was a dark and stormy night. It was actually election night, 1990, November. And the Democrats, we were, if you remember, we just gone through that 50-50 tied. Mike Phillips was speaker on the odd days and Paul Manweiler on the even days, or vice versa. I had won. In fact, I knew I had won because I didn't have an opponent. And I'm in Bloomfield, Indiana, because there was a vacant seat. A guy named Donald Dean had retired as a Republican, and Jerry Denbo, a Democrat, won the seat against a very popular sheriff from Greene County, Gene Gastineau. And I'm in Bloomfield in case it's close. Phillips wants me there because I'm an attorney. We can start a recount process and all of this or that. Mm-hmm. And anyway, Denbo's winning. I mean, there's not going to be any recount. And you didn't have cell phones, so I call in and tell it. And Diane Massariu, the queen, she says to me, whispering, she says, listen, Stan Jones is probably going to get beat tonight. And that means the majority leader's position ought to be open. Most people would have gotten together with their friends and said, which one should we put forward as majority leader? I was a step ahead of them. I decided I should be the one that was majority leader. And then I called my friend. So I came to Indianapolis, took up headquarters in the Columbia Club at night, and went over in room 336 and kept 3 phones going and worked the phones to get elected, and won in a 4-way race on the first ballot. I was very proud of. The only thing that I was more proud of was beating Pat Bauer when I became the minority leader.
Before we move on, can we just take an hour or two and talk about how beautiful and wonderful and amazing Diane Carter is?
Yeah. I made her mad one time because I ate her toast, and she swore at me. She had this special bread that was made by some Catholic order out on the west side, and every morning at 7 o'clock, she'd eat this toast because she came in early, and I came in at 7. I came in one morning, toast is like popcorn. It has a smell that this side of heaven is just indescribable. And she walked out of my office where the toaster was. There was that fake wall in the speaker's office. You push, and the doors opened up. up. I saw that toast in there, ladled with creamery butter, and I took a bite. And before you knew it, I'd eaten the whole thing. And I'm back at the conference table working, and she comes in and saw it, and she pointed her old curved arthritic finger at me and said, John Gregg, and there were some initials. And she said I couldn't swear. I think it was S-O-B. You ate my toast. Don't lie to me. And she was mad. But nobody is a better person than Diane. What a treat.
The best.
Yeah.
Now a lobbyist, was on the staff of the House Democrats for years. Yeah. But one of the points that I was trying to make here by asking you to tell that story is that you're ambitious.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be there, you might as well be in charge. And I mean, I was honored to be there, don't get me wrong. And I sit back there in the back 2 sessions, the second, or two terms, the second one I got on Ways and Means. And I mean, I did. We had a lot of new members, and I worked them. And we also had always a sizable contingency from Southern Indiana then. So new members and Southern Indiana Democrats gave you a majority.
And that was back in the days before the internet. There was no live coverage of the General Assembly. There weren't internet cameras so that people at home could watch. And you had a lot of fun in the back of the chamber with, as I recall, some rubber bands, maybe some clothespins.
I had a couple, 2 or 3 members reminded me that if they ever saw me shoot rubber bands, as you know, like if you were going to give the nightly newscast from one of those Romeo and Juliet balconies that hang out over, because we'd sit in the back and we'd shoot rubber bands up there. And then Jerry Dimbo was the one that started the clothespin, but I may have clothespinned a person once or twice. So then after 2 terms, I'm in charge of enforcing the rules. So that was.
And for those who may not be aware of the practice, when somebody would get up to go address the body, they would attach a clothespin to the bottom of their jacket.
It was just, yeah, it was nothing significant about it. It was just, and of course it made some people just furious, but it was kind of harmless fun. That stuff couldn't go on today where you've got cameras on,
right?
You know, everybody, but.
But you become Speaker of the House and you have to enforce the rules. Yet in the Speaker's office, there were no T.C. Steele paintings. You had framed copies of dogs playing cards.
Poker playing dogs.
Yes.
You know, I'm glad you remember that because I always wanted to remember, people think, you know, I mean, I love T.C. Steele paintings, but I could never afford one. So why should the taxpayers put one in my office here? I could afford poker playing dogs, and I had 5 of them up on the wall. And if you remember, do you remember the thing made out of shells? There were 6 humanoid-looking figures made out of little seashells sitting at a big seashell table playing poker. And I had found it at a garage sale for like $1.50 and bought it. And I wrote on it, to John and Sherry, congratulations on your marriage, Evan and Susan. And stuck that there. And people look at that and say, oh, I see Governor and Mrs. Bai got you a nice wedding gift. You know, it was a gag. Nobody ever picked up on it.
No. And they were supposed to think, that's not what Evan bought.
Yeah,
no.
Yeah.
How was your relationship with Evan Bai?
You know, I got along great with Evan. I was in a couple of classes with him at IU. I'm 2 years ahead of him, just a year older. And I probably, there'd be a lot of members. I got along with him better than probably any legislator, and I think a Democrat. And I think Evan would say the same thing. I was more respectful than most, mainly because I'd always been involved with politics, and we had truly wandered like the Hebrew people in the desert for almost dang near 40 years. And I was always appreciative. Now, do I wish he would have done this, and this? But he brought us to the dance, and you dance with the one who brought you. And, were there things I disagreed with? Yeah, but I viewed him as the team captain, and we tried to help him.
What do you remember most about being Speaker? What did you accomplish? What I
remember most is it wasn't fun, and I say that seriously.
It's herding cats.
it's herding cats, but it's tough. I feel very bad for Speaker Houston because I know he just went through his first, was it full year or second year? Second year. I mean, I'll tell you that first session, even though it's a long one, I mean, you just dread almost going out there because even though you've heard the dialogue and there's a book with it printed out, it takes you a while to get used to it. You got to get used to that machine. You never know who's going to jump up and make a point of order. And even though you've got a parliamentarian, and in the case I had the same thing, Speaker Houston or Speaker Bosma for him, you've got the governor and you have to kind of protect the governor. And sometimes that's easier said than done. Protecting somebody like Mitch Daniels, that was a strong leader, wasn't a problem. Protecting Evan really wasn't much of a problem. Governor O'Bannon, Governor Pence, and Governor Holcomb, not meant as a criticism, maybe weren't in public as forceful of leaders. So there would be people that might try to take advantage. And it was a lot of work. I mean, I'm glad I did it, but it was not fun at the time. Wasn't fun at all. And that's why when I decided, when I was thinking about running for governor, kid you not, I called Joe Kernan. I couldn't call Governor Daniels. It would have been not fair. I did not want to call Evan because I knew I'd get more of a political answer. Called Joe Kernan and I said, I'm thinking about running for governor. I said, I cannot tell you I liked being speaker. I said, I was honored to be speaker. I'm glad I've done it. Did you like being governor? And I remember his answer.
What was it?
He said he liked a little bit of it. He said that he liked being able to deal with, he liked getting to meet new people. He told me he spent more time fighting with Democrats than he did with Republicans. And I think anybody would. You do fight more on your own team. I mean, during 2 gubernatorial campaigns, I never had any crosswords with Mike Pence or Eric Holcomb. I mean, I went to law school with one, knew the other for years, and they were always kind, but you spend most of your time fighting with your own party, and that's not fun.
Yeah, caucus is not fun.
Caucus sucked. Caucus was bad. The people that talk in caucus should keep quiet, and it's always the ones who have nothing to say that want to talk in a caucus. And it's not fun because it gives people an opportunity just to blow off steam, and you got to do it sometimes. I mean, and I'm not saying I did listen to members, but I would much rather have had a roundtable discussion than a caucus because they're feeding off each other.
What's the most number of Democrats you had?
52. When I was the leader, we had 53 one time.
And Speaker Houston has 71.
Oh, I can't imagine. When you have 52, we didn't have to worry about, not even my friend Craig Fry, who just had open heart surgery. Nobody would peel off because the numbers are too close. You got 71 people. I can't imagine what Brian or Speaker Bosma or Speaker Houston dealt with that, That's too many.
We asked Speaker Bosma. Do you remember his answer, Jim?
He said that the optimal number was 58, maybe.
I'd say 57. I could see 58. 57, 58.
In terms of how to manage a caucus.
Yeah. Because you have some people that literally, your vote on some stuff that's partisan, and there's some things that just won't sell in a certain area, and some people ought to be able to break and not always have to do something for the governor. It's normally something that the second floor wants. And the third floor is nothing but Irish infantrymen in an Englishman's army. So just remember that.
The third floor being the legislature.
Yes. We're expendable.
Yes. But you never lost your sense of humor. And one of the stories I love to tell was teamed up with Jim Hester as my news photographer for 23 years. And Jim knew a little American Sign Language, and he taught you some of it at one point.
Boy, I don't remember that. Was it something with a little pizzazz to it?
It was a phrase that most people, the shorthand on it is BS.
Okay.
And
yeah, I guess I do remember it.
Let the court reflect.
Yeah.
Well, so there would be, late nights in the General Assembly. Jim and I would be up on the media balcony, recording someone speaking, and if they went on too long, you would look up at us and do a little sign language.
Well, those were fun things. And my last session, or the last two, we were live on the internet, but with no camera. And I'm sure that it's kind of like what they do with Congress. I'm sure that's changed the dynamics. I could probably tell you real quickly who loves to talk. Yeah. I mean, the legislature was fun. It was fun, but it was fun, serious. It was enjoyable. There was camaraderie among the members, Democrats and Republicans. There were differences. But to tell you how much fun it was and the relationships you built, I can't tell you how many times in two unsuccessful statewide campaigns for governor. I only say that because I got two Republicans sitting in there. That, or I could
not counting me. Not counting.
Say who's the other one,
or I could have been somebody. I can't tell you how many times I would go to a city and that former or that current Republican legislator, they weren't coming to the event, but they knew I was going to be there, and they showed up and would greet me, welcome me to their town, and that was nice. It really was.
Well, so let's talk about running for governor. You ran against Mike Pence, 2012.
2012. And I want to remind you, I could walk into a room of 100 people and take great pride in knowing that 50 of them had not voted for him, because he only got 49.7. They always say he got 50. I had 47. If he can round up, he really won by 2 points. I mean, if we would have had
the closest race for governor in 50 years,
60 years, but yeah.
So, yeah.
I've had people tell me,
all we needed was 72 more hours, and we'd have got
I've had several Democrats tell me, I used to work for Mike Pence. I didn't work for him in that election, but I was the head of his Veteran Affairs Policy Committee. But I have had several Ds brag on you and said, if we'd have had another 3 to 4 days, Greg would have won that. Do you think that's true? And why would that have been true?
I'll tell you why. First of all, we had the momentum. And I don't mean any of this to speak ill of Vice President Pence, because he's somebody that I have respect for the office, and he and I have been friends. He really wasn't pushing anything other than, hey, if you like Mitch Daniels, me too. And, keep the good thing going, good to great. Didn't really have any substantive programs. And that sounds great for the ads, but there were people that thought and looked beyond the party labels. You'd had Dick Lugar had been upset. So that tells you, you've got some establishment Republicans out there. But the momentum was gaining for us. We did not have much money, but we had driven home the message. He had never passed anything. He had never done anything in Congress. He was all about social issues. And on Friday, before the election on Tuesday, he kind of pulled a boner. They had hid him for the last 6 weeks. He was trying to just run the clock out, which you can't do in politics. Found that out in 16. But Mike had a reporter literally was chasing him from Louisville down in the New Albany area. And I've seen the footage. He literally ran to the car, and they were trying to block him from getting interviewed. And if that would have been shown up here, we would have had enough time to make that an issue and shown up here. I think it would have really made people wonder, because we were just gaining. I mean, you could sense it. You could feel it. You saw it in the crowds. We didn't have any money. We raised $6 million. Mike had 15 or 16. I mean, he had more people than a small Central American country.
Go ahead, Jim.
Well, your ad campaign featured you on camera in every ad, right? Except maybe the last one.
The first ones did, yeah. I mean, and they were same guy that had done Hogstad when he smelled the tennis shoes. Same guy did my first ads. I mean, they were what some would consider hokey, but people still remember them.
Somewhat humorous.
Yeah, they were.
Right. If you had that race to run over again, would you have taken a different approach?
No, I wouldn't have, because we ran all serious substantive campaigns the second time around. Didn't make any difference. No. And no, because I think the ads were so unique. It caught people, and they had a message, but it was saying them a unique way. I would not have, what I would have done different, I'd have focused on raising money more. I felt like I needed to be out and be seen and visit people. That didn't mean anything. And I knew better. As Speaker of the House, I knew you had to have money. So the second time I raised money.
You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, a local veteran public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, Garmong Construction, Leaders and Legends, LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and MacAllister Machinery, your friendly neighborhood Caterpillar dealer. Our guest on the podcast is former Indiana Speaker of the House and two-time gubernatorial candidate, John Gregg. We are joined by our frequent co-host. Can I call you lovely and talented?
Absolutely.
Lovely and talented Jim Shella. Speaker Gregg, is there a particular Hoosier leader and or legend you admire most?
Oh, wow. I think we've literally in my lifetime been blessed with a lot of good leaders. I used to make the comment that Bob Orr was the nicest guy I never voted for. He always liked it when I would say that. But I guess I thought our governors were good. I grew up knowing Matt Welsh because he was from Knox County and our state chair was from there. So I remember Governor Welsh as a young man and then as former governor. I thought Dr. Bowen, whereas I did not support him because I'm a Democrat, but he was very, very popular. And it was interesting. He was so popular that Bob Orr was really under his shadow most of that time. And I will say something in defense of Mike Pence. Mitch Daniels was real, real popular. I mean, I got so tired of people saying to me, well, we like you, but we want to vote for Mitch. It was always, hey, time out. Mitch isn't running again. But whoever, had I been fortunate enough to win that race, whoever would have followed Mitch Daniels would have been governor with a small g. And I mean, Mike obviously became vice president, but he was still not considered one of Indiana's better governors, nor would I have been had I have followed Mitch Daniels. Now, could I have followed Mike Pence? A whole different story.
Would you have wanted to have been speaker when Mitch Daniels was governor?
I would have done some things different. And I'll quote from his speech in 2012 or 2013. I do think as an opposition person, you need to point out some differences, but you also need to support them when they're correct. And there were some things he tried doing. None of the union stuff I liked, but there were some things he did on the toll road and some other things that the Democrats should have supported. I mean, they just didn't do it because of politics, and that's wrong.
Well, I was communications director at the Indiana Republican Party and was sitting next to Chris Spangle on the Abdul show. Well, you were in the booth next to us. And I said on live air, I didn't lose my job, even though Murray Clark half laughed and half wanted to fire me. When I said, if Pat Bauer says no anymore, he could have been my prom date. Do you think the Democrats should have worked in concert a little bit more and said, hey, look, we didn't vote for you, but let's move this state. Let's get it out of its rut.
Yeah, I didn't. I also want to say that I thought Governor Daniels was wrong to say it had been mismanaged for so long, but that's history. I do. I think Pat's a friend, but Pat was the wrong leader at that time. You needed a leader who would try to do certain things to make it more appealing to Democrats, make it stronger in labor, make it stronger in spending money all over the state or any number of things. I think they should have cooperated a little bit more because some of them were moving the state forward. You saw that during Bill Clinton's time. You saw Tip O'Neill do it under Ronald Reagan. You saw Newt even do it under Bill Clinton. So, yeah, I think it was a missed opportunity, but Mitch was strong enough it happened anyway,
When I was reading through your bio, and I want to go back in history for just a little bit, because you must be I would say, 6th to 10th guest who's had this experience, Greg Ballard being one of them. What was it like to be at Indiana University when they went 32-0 and won the national championship? I say that because Quinn Buckner has agreed to come on the podcast.
Really? Mm-hmm. I got to meet Quinn Buckner when I ran for governor the second time. I was over at the Pacers and I saw him walking down the hall and I just mentioned to Greg Schenkel and Herb Simon, I've always wanted to meet Quinn Buckner. He came in there and we had a nice chat. It was great. You knew it was going to be a good season because if you remember the year before, Scotty May broke his collarbone or whatever. I never missed a home game. I still hear the song Philadelphia Freedom by Elton John. And I think of the 1976 undefeated champion. in, and they didn't call off classes the next day. I was in a class the next day that was a senior seminar, which had less than 20 people, very small at IU, and our professor came in and says, I cannot cancel this class. We're going to have class. She lectured for about 30 minutes, knocked at the door. Her husband came in carrying pizzas and a cooler, and I'm just going to leave it at that, because I've told too many people.
Well, it was the 70s.
No, it was the 70s, but it was great. You know what? And I can remember being on campus. You'd see Kent Benson walking around. He'd speak to people. I can remember Quinn Buckner. I mean, I'd never met him. But they'd see you and they'd smile and wave. Now, Bobby Knight was an ASS. He wouldn't smile. He'd act like, you could stuck a flaxseed in his hind end. It would have hurt. But he just wasn't pleasant at all. Lee Corso, on the other hand, he was the football coach, and he was kind of like the second coming walking through campus. Hell, he'd have students following him. I forgot I can't swear on this.
You disguised it.
Okay.
I'm going to bring you back to politics if it's okay. Going back to the 2012 race and how close it was, the closeness of that race, is that what convinced you to run again?
It's tough losing a race like that. And I hope I've never been bitter or said anything unkind in a personal sense against Vice President Pence or Governor Holcomb. I couldn't shake the thought after it was over, because I started thinking of things I'd done wrong. And the first thing was I had not focused on raising money. We came that close. If I would have had $2 million more, we'd have been on television and other areas closer, and I thought it would make a difference. I could not shake that thought in 2013, 2014, and I kind of gone out and did some thank yous, to some JJ dinners and stuff. My dad was still alive, but he was sick. And, he kept saying, you need to run again. Subsequently, Dad passed away, but that wasn't it. It just, I just felt like, I want to do this again. And if I get the chance to do it, here's what I'm going to do, and here's what I'm going to do different. And I'm going to focus on raising money. The people in the party knew me. And we had a great campaign the second time. I mean, I felt like we had the best possible campaign team, Tim Henderson, Councilwoman Kristen Jones. I mean, it was a great campaign team. We had great consultants. We had money. We did everything right, but you're not guaranteed to win, and we didn't.
Tim Henderson's very talented.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very talented.
And you know what? I'll be candid. If I had to lose, and I've told this to him, there's not a nicer guy in my book, and I would not want to hurt him with Republicans saying this, but I like Eric Holcomb. I mean, it's not like I could be mad at him. I mean, we both want to do the same thing. We both want to be governor.
I had a conversation with a very high-ranking member of the Pence administration here in Indiana about 2 weeks before the election. And I said, what's going to happen? And he said, if Trump wins by 10, Eric wins. If Trump doesn't win by 10, Eric loses. Is that how you saw it?
We thought 12. We made it to 14. I mean, that's huge numbers to make up. We knew it all depended on how he was, but you got to remember.
And Trump won by 19.
He won by 19. Yeah. So, I mean, we lost 5 points. We were in that race, and the moment the FBI director, Comey, who Trump gives the devil to, announced that they were going to look at Mrs. Clinton's computer again 10 days before the election, I mean, Evan dropped overnight. It took a while for us to drop, but we were headed down, and it was just a question, will it level off before Election Day? And looking back on it, it was probably best. You couldn't tell that. The last 2 weeks, all the TV time's bought. As a candidate, it's fun because you are just going out, meeting people. We were seeing great crowds and everything. I was a Democrat. I knew what was happening at the national level. I knew it could affect us. But it finally dawned on me the night before the election, oh, pal, we were back at the farm, my wife and I, Lisa, and I just told her, I said, now we need to be prepared because I don't think tomorrow's going to be good. And I said, I'll deal with telling the children and my two brothers because they have to deal. I did not want to deal with my mother on this. Not that she would have been mad or anything. I just, and I knew I knew at 20 till 7 I was defeated. In fact, I called called Governor Holcomb at 7:00 sharp, congratulated him, and I can tell he's kind of dumbfounded. I said, "Look, I won Vigo County by 3,500 votes, and I should have won it by 6. I won Sullivan County by 1,200, and I should have won it by 2,000. This is over for me." And I told him, as I did then, I said, "If I'm going to have to lose to somebody, I'd a lot rather have lost to you than the Susan Brooks."
Oh, I'm sure. Really?
I can't tell you.
All I want to know, all I wanted was David Brooks to be the first gentleman of Indiana.
Yeah, that would be fun.
But I mean,
Were you guys in law school together, were you?
Yeah. I was in law school with Susan, loved Susan, Brian Bosma, and Mike Pence, and me. I think anybody would have said we would have all sought higher office. I think most of them, since they're an intelligent bunch, felt like I should have gone the furthest, but
well, I talked to Eric Holcomb the day before Election Day.
Yeah.
He had just seen some polling numbers, and he was very happy.
Yeah.
And he also knew that his fate was tied to Donald
President
Trump.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was.
And then 4 years later in 2020, Holcomb wins, was it 59, 57%?
59. And, I think I got 47 something the first time. What would he get? 29? And I don't know what we'll see in the U.S. Senate race this time. I wouldn't think it'd be 40.
Jim, why don't you take him through politics and the Democratic Party? And it probably wouldn't be fair for me to do it.
Well, Democrats are in bad shape at the moment. I think I did some stories back in 1985 or 1986 about how desperate circumstances were for the Indiana Democratic Party, and I don't think they're any better now than they were then. But as you said, Evan Bayh managed to bring the Democrats out of the wilderness. Is there reason for hope at this point?
Well, yes, you have to tell yourself, and I'm a Democrat, a proud Democrat. You have to tell yourself, in order to keep going as a candidate or as a party stalwart, that it's going to get better. And I tell myself that, with each day like this, where the Republicans control everything, we're one day closer to breaking that hold. I just don't know when it will be. We're seeing a realignment of the parties. When I left the legislature, we had 23 members from Southern Indiana. Today, we've got 4, and one's from Bloomington. And, it's in Southern Indiana, but it's not Southern Indiana. So you've had an alignment of the parties, both parties. Stuff used to be, if you talk jobs, you talk salaries, you talk money, that would get people's attention. We're on this us versus them stuff right now, and that's got to play out. And I hope it plays out for the better of the country, of course.
Who is a better running mate, Bayh Simpson or Christina Hale?
Let the record reflect the hand gesture,
more sign language.
More sign language.
I will. They were both two different running mates, and Vi's been a friend, and her husband Bill, since the early '80s, and Vi had a knowledge of state government comparable to mine, and in finances, probably a little better. Christina was new, but she had that youthful exuberance. Which comes along with it. They were both fun to run with.
You just sparked something in my brain that I think we
there's
need
a miracle.
You. No, we need you to tell the story about the time you were arrested in Russia.
Oh, well, I was arrested with Bill McCarty. Long story short, we were in Almaty, out in the area of Uzbekistan, which bordered up against Afghanistan, and the Soviets had invaded it.
You were there. Well, you were there.
Anderson College sent
a group of students.
Sent a group of students. Bill was an adjunct. They sent somebody that worked at the university. The full-time professor, something happened, couldn't go. I get invited by McCarty at the last second to go because I had a passport. Boom, we're over there. We're over there for 24 days, and on about the 20th day, the last day we're in Almaty, we were going to go see a ballet. Now, at that point in my life, before I went to Russia, I'd only seen 2 ballets, and it was the Nutcracker 2 times at IU. But they seemed to think we ought to see a ballet almost every day when we were in Russia. And I decided I'm not going to another ballet. Bill thought the same thing. So Bill and I and 2 students, we take off, which was a no-no. You traveled with an in-tourist guide. You stayed at a hotel with just Americans. I mean, there was none of this wandering around. We go over to the train station. We're standing there at this train station. All of a sudden, this Dr. Zhivago-like train came in with sandbags, armor plating, anti-aircraft guns, and soldiers armed out the wazoo. I mean, it looked like a Republican meeting. I mean, they were that armed. Let the record show. And anyway, so this one girl pulls out her camera, click, 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 taking pictures. You don't take pictures in the Soviet Union. They're not fond of that. I mean, and we were taller than the Kyrgyz. Yeah, they were Kyrgyz. It was in Kyrgyzstan, or however you pronounce it. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere appears Slavic people who are Russian. And I mean, these guys came up, they grabbed her camera and off we went into a room. Where
you didn't take pictures?
One light bulb. I did not take a picture. The picture of me that you've heard about is me standing in front of the Kremlin. It's in my library at home with a red shirt on, and I've got my jacket open. It says better dead than red. It was harrowing. It was. I mean, you didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, they were, the country sure as heck wasn't going to worry about four idiots out in the middle of nowhere that had caused their own problem. And they kept us till about 11 o'clock that night, questioning us and let us go back to our hotel rooms. And the next morning we got up, we got on the plane to leave to fly to now what's called St. Petersburg. The plane door opened up and on came one of these guys. And I thought, they're coming to get us off. And they're going to, he didn't. He came in, he walked through the plane, went out the back and took off. And Bill always thought the reason why we didn't get in any serious trouble was that it would have gotten the guide and all the other people in trouble because they had let us wander around and nobody had stopped us. So, but we were scared. I mean, I thought, I'm not going to make it home, and I really didn't have much of a many Russian jokes. So I knew it was going to be tough.
You wrote a book.
Yes. Sanborn to the Statehouse. Also wrote a second one, but I'm not done anything with it yet.
You going to publish it?
I don't know.
What's it about?
Well, I made my friend Jim Madison, Dr. James Madison, said I ought to
historian at IU.
Write one, historian at IU, kind of the father of Indiana history. And he says if I write one, I need to be candid. Not that I wouldn't be, but if somebody was not up to par, you need to say it. And he goes, if you don't like it, maybe you have it published after you're gone.
So this is also autobiographical.
Yeah, if I finish it. I mean, it's mainly, but I tell funny stories also in it about, running for governor. I mean, running for governor was like being on a sabbatical. I mean, it was work 24/7, but it was fun. I mean, think of it. I got to spend 4 years of my life, 11, 12, 15, 16, traveling around the state of Indiana. The only way it'd have been better is if I'd have won.
Yeah. I haven't written a book myself, but I did write a chapter in a James Madison book published by the Historical Society,
Really?
The Governors of Indiana. There's one chapter on every governor, and I wrote the Mitch Daniels chapter.
No kidding. Yeah. I always thought there ought to be a guide like to the birthplaces of people who ran for governor that didn't get elected.
Has Governor Daniels seen your chapter?
I'm pretty sure. I actually, I asked him some questions for input into it. The book itself is written almost entirely by historians. Randall Shepard wrote 2 chapters, and I was the only one who, besides him, who wasn't a historian, because Daniels was in office at the time, and they needed a journalist because it wasn't history yet.
Right. May I ask you a question about 2008? What made you decide to back Hillary Clinton as opposed to Barack Obama? It seemed that there were a lot of people who were excited by Senator Obama's candidacy and really kind of split the Democratic Party. And I know some of those feuds are still ongoing, but what made you choose Hillary over him?
Evan Bayh asked me to. I mean, I was a fan of Evan's. Evan had toyed with the idea, in 6 and 7, running for president. And of course, that never materialized. And Hogsett, as I recall, Hogsett had actually called and said, hey, listen, we got to help Hillary. And how I am. I made some kind of comment like, count me out. I'm not doing that. And he says, look, you can either do it or I'm going to have Evan call you. And I got the call from Evan wanting to know, is there a problem? And I said, no, Governor. I always call him Governor. There's 100 senators, only 50 governors. Remember that. Rome fell because it only had a Senate, by the way. So, I mean, he asked me to, and I was a buy loyalist in that sense. I liked President Clinton. I didn't have anything against Senator Obama at the time, but there was another race. Had that lasted 36 hours later in Indiana, we would have lost that. You could sense it. Although Hoosiers were excited to see Bill, and there was a lot of enthusiasm, that national momentum had caught up here.
What was it? Because
go ahead. Hillary won the primary,
right?
By one percentage point.
1%, and of course she lost in North Carolina,
right?
Yeah,
on the same day.
Same day.
What was it like? I mean, this was, really sui generis, right? In your lifetime, there'd never been anything like that.
No.
I guess if you count 68, that would be it. But in your time here, Jim, as a journalist, I mean, that just must have been a singular situation and journalistic story and political rally.
Oh, well, yes. And it was just one amazing event after another. I mean, absolutely. Bill Clinton did a rally late in the campaign at North Central High School.
Yeah. That
was pandemonium. And then you got Barack Obama on the American Legion Mall with 40,000 people. Yeah. If you'll remember, one of the things I hold on to from that, all these people are on the American Legion Mall waiting for Barack Obama, and he was late in a significant way. It was because he was up at Asherwood taping his closing commercial, where they had created a stage that looked like the Oval Office.
Asherwood, which would be the estate of the Simons.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you look back, because a lot of people say they don't believe Indiana voted Democrat in 2008. I don't remember the number, but the number of times that President Obama, as candidate Obama, and then nominee Obama was in the state, and then you had both.
I think it was 49.
49, and both Clintons would have added up probably to 30, 35. That made a difference. I mean, it did. All kinds of people voted. They were enthused. I mean, it was fun to travel with Bill Clinton. I mean, he was going in small places, and there were people showing up, Republicans as well as Democrats. Hoosiers wanted to see and hear an ex-president, and he spoke. He had the ability to talk to a whole crowd and everybody connect with it. But I can remember in Huntington, Indiana. No, it's whatever's due west of there. It's not Huntington. Whatever's due west. We had a governor from there sitting in a locker room, and Bill Clinton was straddling a bench in this sweat-smelled locker room with Hogsett and I and an aide, ton of Secret Service guys back. We're just talking, and we had ordered from a deli, ordered ham sandwiches. Well, you're in Indiana. It was ham salad. And I can still see Bill Clinton biting into this, talking. And he was lecturing or sharing something, and that ham salad's falling out. It's not getting on him, but it's falling down on his napkin down below. And I can still smell that locker room and taste that ham salad. Yeah, a lot of fun.
There's a great picture of you standing next to Rex Early. You're in, is it Vincent?
Vincent University. We're both Vincent University grads.
I haven't seen the picture in years, but I just remember it. What's it like to be Rex Early's friend?
Well, Rex is that individual that is a character, in that he has character and he is a character. And I think that's about the highest compliment you can give someone. He's enjoyable to be around. He mixes with all people, but he's also a person of integrity and ethics and honesty. Think the world of him, and wish him well.
And he's got a line for everything.
Yes,
and a memorable line for everything.
I remember
not all of them original, but
no, but I can remember when Brian Howey had his 20th or 25th anniversary. I'm out of politics. I had not been a candidate for governor, and he had something over. Where's that place that Antelope Club? He had something over there. I walk into there, Brian Howie's there, and then all of a sudden starts filling up with people, and Rex and I are to tell stories. They introduce Rex first, so Rex is in the middle of something, and Russ Pulliam walks in behind him, and he's behind him, and Rex stops and he goes, hey, he says, I got to move. He said, I'm not going to stand with my back to a Pulliam. Those people never did anything for me. Right in the middle of the speech, I'm thinking, whoa.
He always told it like he meant it.
But if Rex Early wins, big if, in 1996, when he runs for the nomination for governor, he loses to Goldsmith, who then, Stephen Goldsmith, then loses to Frank O'Bannon. What would it have been like if Rex Early was governor and you were speaker?
Oh, boy. That would have been fun. We might have traveled around the state together, talking about Indiana. We would have had differences, but they would have been political, never personal. I mean, that's one thing a lot of people miss, and I think stuff has turned too personal today. But, as I tell people, both Mike Pence and Eric Holcomb, they're not my enemies. They were my political opponent. I don't have anything against them. Our differences weren't personal. They were just politics. We all wanted the same job.
What are some of the other Republicans who you enjoyed, whose company you've enjoyed?
Well, Paul Manweiler was a good person to work with. He was speaker when I got elected, and I also had was minority leader when I was speaker, which was even more enjoyable. He was really delightful. Former state chair Mike McDaniel was always enjoyable to deal with. You had a former sheriff here, Jack Cotty, who was kind of a character and a slice of life as far as a Republican. That was
you guys were in the house together, correct?
Yeah, we were in the house. I'll tell you somebody who was always nice to us when we go out to D.C. There wasn't anybody ever treated us nicer than Danny Burton, of all people.
Cotty and Burton were very close.
Yeah, they were. But Danny Burton was always kind when we were out there. Dick Lugar, who I had never met, I, as Speaker of the House, make a call out to his office, and I get a call back like the next day from, I'd recognize the name if I heard, would there have been a Marty Oakes?
No, it was Marty Morris.
Somebody that worked for Senator Lugar.
He was his chief of staff.
Okay, and wanted to know if this is John Gregg, the speaker. And I said, yeah. And he said, we've got this funny message. I said, I've never met Dick Lugar. I said, when he comes to my county, he's at a Republican fundraiser. I said, I can't go to a Republican fundraiser. I'd like to invite him next time he's in town, come to the Statehouse and then come to our caucus. And they accepted. He came and addressed the Statehouse for about 15, 20 minutes. I recessed. We went to a caucus, and I told two people, John Day and Dennis Avery. I said, the man's a United States Senator, and he's coming here. I know you don't agree with anything he's done, but if you're going to talk or ask questions, just don't come to the caucus. Because we wanted to hear him. And, he came in, I called it to order, introduced him, they stood up and clapped, and he talked about foreign affairs for 20, 25 minutes. And it was just great. What a man. I mean, and I never voted for him. But he did this out of loyalty to the process. I guess I did vote for him in 2006 because he didn't have an opponent.
One other year I want to mention before we get to the final 5 questions. We're here with former Indiana House Speaker John Gregg and our frequent co-host Jim Shella. I'm going to need to pick up my notes here because I don't have my reading glasses on. 1996. You are speaker. The House is 50-50.
Yeah.
What was that like, given what we just talked about earlier in terms of how many people you want to have in the caucus? Sure. And Jim, what was that like to cover?
Well, it was nothing like the first 50-50. I can tell you that. That was, one of the memories that I'll hold on to forever is
that's 88, right?
Yeah, 88 to 90. Yeah.
Yes, in the 88 election, the Indiana House comes up 50-50. 2 weeks after Election Day, they meet for Organization Day, as they always do. They meet on Tuesday afternoon. They are essentially in session. There are negotiations taking place off the floor, but they were in session until Thanksgiving morning. on
and who
Thursday.
was presiding?
The Secretary of State, Evan Bayh.
Who was governor-elect.
Yes. But that was, I put in a lot of hours that week.
Yeah.
I remember writing a story after daybreak on Thanksgiving Day and getting it filed and getting home so I could take a nap in order to have Thanksgiving dinner. But it was that was just the beginning. I mean, there were battles for 2 years about who was controlling committees and but it changed everything about the House of Representatives because they changed so many rules.
You could call down your own bill. Now the speaker had to put it on the calendar, so but it did change it. And then when I was speaker and it was tied, Paul Manweiler, after trying an illegal and unethical reapportionment mid Baker versus Carr decennial census, we
absolutely have to get Speaker Manweiler on the podcast.
You have to get Paul on that because Paul, you were wrong and you know it. But anyway, what happened? We had changed the rules, so I got to appoint all the committee chairs, and we had a majority on all the committees. So it worked. It brought legislation to the floor, but you always had to have one Republican to pass anything. And we went into special session that night. I left that voting machine open and open and open on the third and final reading because the Senate had passed the budget. We're trying to get the concurrence, and I'm waiting for either Dan Steffen or Jerry Bales. And it was like, Lord, please, I just want to go home. And it didn't happen.
So at 50-50,
nothing passed.
But at 50-50, why did you end up as Speaker? Because the Secretary of State was a D?
Governor. Secretary of State was a Republican. It was Sue Ann Gilroy. They had tied it to the highest elected
not 90.
official.
Well, and
90. This
you're 96.
This is 96.
96, forgive me.
Yes.
Yeah, Frank O'Bannon beat Steve
Sue Ann Gilroy.
And when
that's right.
And when they had changed the rules in '88, that was one of the rules they changed.
It'd be governor in the gubernatorial years and Secretary of State in the other ones. Because the Republicans thought there's no way Steve Goldsmith's going to lose to Frank O'Bannon, and he did.
Were you surprised?
No. I was surprised that I was surprised we tied 50-50, and that was a tough time to get negotiated and get going. But no, I mean, people liked Evan Bayh. Frank O'Bannon was likable. It was kind of like Mitch handing it off to Mike Pence. I mean, when you got a real good governor, people are kind of happy and they kind of tend that way. And they liked Frank. Frank was a likable guy, and Evan had been a good governor in the eyes of the public. So it just happened.
One of the questions and Jim, correct me if I get this wrong, but one of the questions you asked Speaker Bosma when we had him on the podcast a few months ago was really, it said that the Speaker is the second most powerful person, but the most powerful person when the legislature is in session. Did you feel that way?
Well, I know the stars always said that.
It would apply only if you had a majority, certainly.
Yeah, and we had a majority the last two times. For you to think that would have been hubris, and the ancient gods struck down people filled with hubris. So
I promise not to ask Todd Houston that if he comes on the podcast, but I'm happy to ask you that.
I can't say that I did. I mean, I was aware of the power, but I was still just John Gregg. I don't feel being Speaker changed me. There might be people think it did. If it did, I apologize to them, but I'm still about the same now as I was when I got out of high school. I mean, I think it's important you remember where you're from.
Did you ever feel like, okay, you obviously don't understand, whoever you is, how much power I have, therefore I'm going to have to demonstrate it to you by killing your bill or putting you on a committee you don't like or whatever? Did you ever feel like you had to every once in a while just say, you need an education? There
were times that you had to exercise the power, not so much because you wanted to, but because if you wouldn't, it could cause an erosion or something, shall we say. I mean, I removed a Democrat committee chairman of rules, a guy named Tom Alavizos, who's now a judge, in session from the rostrum. I was reading, the chair announces that from this day forward, Representative Tom Alavizos, chairman of Rules and Legislative Procedure, is replaced by John Gregg, D. Sanborn, and then just went right on. And you'll be, what? He had done something bad, and real bad, and so had to remove him. And I didn't like it because I liked him, but it had to happen.
Jim, do you have just a couple more questions before we do the final five?
Well, as we're doing a podcast, and you had a radio show for a long time
that Mike Pence hired me for.
Interestingly enough, did you do that for the joy of doing radio, or did you see it as a way to advance your political career?
Not at all political. I had fun. I mean, it was a hoot. It had nothing to do with politics because I knew at some point I'd not run again, and I hit that point. And I stayed on the radio 4 or 5 years after that. I
remember seeing you on the street, not being a street person. You were just on the street, and it was after the November 16 election, and you and I talked for a few minutes, and I asked you, did the vice president-elect call you after Election Day?
Yeah, Mike, Vice President-elect Pence called me on Thursday morning. I had an apartment here, right over there, as I'm pointing northwest from downtown. And, it said on the screen, Mike Pence, and I thought, this is somebody from his staff calling. And I said, John Gregg, and he said, John, Mike, and I called him Mr. Vice President. We had a nice talk. He wanted to know how I was doing. Knew it had been a tough campaign. It had been up and down, and we had been ahead and behind and everything. I mean, it was very gracious of him to call. When he was governor, he even invited me up to the office for a day. Not for the whole day, but invited me to come up and see him. And he was always very kind, very professional in that sense. And when he had his radio show and I was speaker, I always enjoyed being interviewed by Mike. He was never anything but nice. We didn't agree, but he was never anything but professional, nice, never personal, not like Jim.
I was going to say, what's it like to step into the pit with Jim Shella and Jim Hester, by the way?
I love Jim and Jim Hester. I mean, I enjoyed the press corps. I mean, these guys knew what was going on. And what people don't realize today, there is no press corps anymore. Thus, there's no watchdog over there. And our system is better served if every citizen knows what's going on in that building. Even if they think they don't need to know it, they're better served. And right now, it's just hard getting that word out to people.
There's a press corps. It's significantly smaller, well,
it's about the size of the Democrat Party.
There's something to that.
Boy, that you just put something on the tee for me that I'm not going to swing at.
Okay.
Well, the only other thing we didn't touch on was your service as interim president of Vincennes University. When you took that post, did you have hopes that it would become permanent?
I took the job. Thank you for asking that. I took that job with the understanding I could not be a candidate for president. And the board that hired me had 5 things they wanted us to focus on. We literally had all 5 of them accomplished, 4 of them completely accomplished by the end of October. And I can remember it's the end of October, and I'm told that I'm going to have a dinner in this conference room off the president's office with the provost and a couple other people. I didn't think to ask what it was. This was before you had these things. I had one of those
BlackBerry?
Yeah, BlackBerry, something like that. I don't remember what it was. And I walk in there, and there's a couple of people in the university, a couple of our alumni, and a couple of board members. And they want me to know that they have decided that they have talked informally with the board, and they want to rescind that and me to consider put my name in to be president. And they said, we don't want an answer now, because I would have told them no then. They said they want an answer in 2 weeks. 2 weeks comes. I said, look, I'm fine for this. You had some things that really need to be done. I could come in and do them. Didn't have to worry about where the bodies were and all of that stuff. I could do them. But I said, I'm not an academic, and I don't think long-term I'm best for the university. I also realized that we were likely going to lose the governor's race, and I didn't know how a Republican board would feel to having somebody that was a Democrat in there. And the third thing was Elvis. Elvis always knew when to leave. I left the legislature, and I've got 7 or 8 nice editorials about it. With no disrespect to the late Larry Borst or Bob Garton, they didn't get any. When people say, why did you leave? As opposed to why don't you leave, it's a big difference. And I left the Statehouse at the top of my game. I left VU at the top of my game. You always want them wanting more, and I left both times. And I thought I'd come back for an encore, but that didn't always work out.
We've reached the point in the Leaders and Legends podcast where we ask the same 5 questions of all of our guests. Jim, do you want to ask them?
Sure. The first one is, what was your first job?
Delivering newspapers.
What newspaper?
The Bicknell Daily News, which was the first paper that the Pulliam family ever owned in Indiana, according to Russ.
Okay, and I know they later owned the Vincennes Sun commercial, right? What was your first concert?
Oh, thank you. The Beatles, 1964 for my 10th birthday, afternoon show at the State Fair.
Excellent.
Can't be beat as an answer.
That's right. Love me do.
If you could suggest any book for someone to read, which book would you recommend? One book.
Well, you're always supposed to say the Bible, so I'll give the standard answer that most politicians do. And I am serious in that it is a great book, whether you're a believer or not. I would say, because I rarely, if ever, read fiction, so this goes against everything I'm going to say, but I would say either To Kill a Mockingbird or The Great Gatsby.
I think those are 2 good choices.
We should note that the last time Speaker Gregg went out of the country for a vacation with his lovely wife and or friends and whomever, I got the call saying, Robert, I need 4 or 5 books to read while I'm out of the country. Give me some titles.
A beach read, maybe a beach read of some kind. If you could witness any event in history, be there in person as it happens, which event would you choose?
It would have had to been one of 2, and I know you asked for one. It'd either have to be when they debated the Declaration of Independence or the signing of the Constitution. One of those 2. They would have both been great.
Independence Hall in Philadelphia. I stayed at a hotel. I stayed at a hotel right across the street a couple of weeks ago.
Very popular answer.
Is it? It would have just been great.
And it's still a very popular tourist site.
I was just there last week.
Yeah. Final question. If you could have dinner with anyone living today, 2 hours off the record, just to chat, whom would you choose?
Oh, that's easy. You got to realize I'm the same age as you. It'd be Ronnie Howard.
Who is the same age as us?
Yeah, who's Opie, who is an accomplished actor and a director, and he's just somebody I'd like to meet.
He's an interesting
I know
guy.
I should have said Indira Gandhi or something.
He's an interesting guy. I know he's got several kids, and they're all named after the place where they were conceived. Correct?
Yeah.
He just put a book out with his brother Clint. Have you seen that book?
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
I'll buy it.
You are the readingest one, son of a gun. Your suggestions I always like. I have some people come in, we know you like to read. Here's a book. And I hate not reading it, but boy, you get some crap books.
Well, I appreciate the call. This is an honor. When I saw your name come up on my phone, I'm like, I don't think I did anything wrong, but you never really know.
Yeah.
It's like when Shella would call me for an interview, and I'm like, God, we must have screwed up. Shella's calling me. You have been listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, a local veteran public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, Garmong Construction, Leaders and Legends, LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and MacAllister Machinery, your friendly neighborhood Caterpillar dealer. Our guest today has been former Indiana Speaker of the House, John Gregg, and we were joined by Jim Shella from Wish TV, Emeritus. Thank you both so much. It's great to see the two of you together.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening to Leaders and Legends, brought to you by Veteran Strategies Incorporated. If you want to contact us about this program or our menu of public relations services, please send us an email at robert@veteranstrategies.com. That's robert@veteranstrategies.com.
This podcast was produced and edited by Chris Spangle and Leaders and Legends, LLC. If you're interested in starting a podcast or taking yours to the next level, please contact us at leadersandlegends.net.